Pangaea theory of continental drift is wrong. However, it is still generally accepted, still she taught in our schools. This is another example of something you do not want us to know. In the following video you can see how the continents fit perfectly, when they stay the same size and their relative positions on the surface of the Earth remain, but the actual mass of the Earth is reduced. One way that we knew that Africa and South America were together at one point was the way they fit almost perfectly, when they are closer to each other. That is one of the main ways we know that the continents fit together at one point. But what scientists do not mean is that the continents also fit in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The only reason that the instinctive theory of Pangaea still exists is because it is difficult to conceptually visualize the expanse of the Pacific, as it is very large. While watching the video, you may begin to wonder what other lies they tell us about our world, of ourselves, of Darwinian evolution, for example. If you've ever seen a map of the world, no doubt notice that the east coast of South America seems to mimic the shape of the west coast of Africa. This observation was also noted by the German geophysicist Alfred Wegener, who proposed that the continents we see today were once connected. His theory continental verschiebung was ridiculed and rejected by 40 years, because nobody could imagine how continents could move, and essentially break through the crust of the ocean floor. But in the 1950s a research vessel of the Lama Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia University conducted a study deep-sea floor of the Atlantic Ocean, and discovered a huge underwater mountain range called the dorsal mid-Atlantic. Later it was discovered that each ocean contains parts of it, interconnected system of ocean ridges. While the ridge system runs through the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the crest is far away from other oceans. Ocean ridge. A thorough examination of the mid-Atlantic ridge and other ocean ridges reveals that they were formed by cracks in the Earth's crust that allowed the magma comes to the surface, to cool and solidify to become the new crust. In fact, samples of the base of the crust on each side of the peaks showed that it was relatively new and extended outward away from the ridge. In the end, the theory of plate tectonics was accepted. Wegener. Does the cite subduction? One of the interesting things about paradigms is that they stubbornly refuse to die. The idea that the Earth had not changed never persisted, although tectonics theory Wegener played was the new paradigm. Sure, new crust has been forming in the ocean ridges and it was moving continents, but the size of the planet could not change, or could it? Assuming that the planet was the same size as it is now, the original Pangaea would have been surrounded by a vast ocean. To maintain a planet the same size, there must be a method to compensate for the new crust being done on ridges. To resolve this dilemma, scientists have theorized that sometimes plates move beneath other plates in a process called subduction. The map above shows the age of the oceanic crust of the Earth from the new red to the oldest blue. There is no direct proof of subduction. No experimental object has been placed to be measured, and have never been observed movement of land masses together. So the question arises, is there an alternative theory? Shortly after Wegener introduced the theory of continental drift, many people tried to recompose continents. Some parts like South America and Africa were an obvious fit, but others do not fit each other due to the belief that a vast ocean had to be accommodated in the models. Sam Carey, an Australian, dared to solve the puzzle without an ocean and continents found that fit perfectly. Of course, this was in the 1930s at a time when the theory of Wegener was still being ridiculed and mocked. But Carey was onto something big. Or smaller. His solution only worked if the Earth was a fraction of its current size. But it worked perfectly. There is strong evidence that the oceans are relatively recent addition to planet Earth. All present ocean floors are geologically young. Current continents, such as Australia, formed about 4.3 billion years ago. By contrast, The geologically oldest seafloor was formed only 180 million years ago. The model of plate tectonics assumes that this is because the oldest oceanic crust has been subducted. For this assumption is correct, an equivalent surface of the Pacific Ocean would have had to be subducted under the Americas since the Jurassic period, without waste or remains of the oldest oceanic crust. Just we do not see that kind of vigorous subduction taking place anywhere in the world today. Biologists have analyzed ancient fossilized plants and animals to determine which inhabited continent and ocean ever. They concluded, the balance of evidence seems to require an expanding Earth. Carey suggested that an experiment was carried out to measure the expansion, and in 1986, the proposal was carried out. A couple of receptors A and B below they settled in different places on Earth, each looking at the same quasar and listening to the radio broadcasts. Quasars are radio sources that serve as a universal lighthouse. Because of the curvature of the Earth, the place A to be a little closer to the signal of the quasar would receive it first. Using the time delay and some geometry, one can determine the difference in distance between the two stations and the quasar. If these measures are taken at a later time, when the two receivers are oriented with respect to the quasar as before, if the B receptor has approached the quasar, the delay time between them will be less. Since we know that the distance between the two receivers A and B has not changed, the evidence of his apparent shift away from the quasar C must be attributed to the fact that the curvature of the Earth has decreased from expansion. Over a period of 10 years, the experimental results showed an expansion of the Earth about 2 cm per year, 2.0 cm a year, while the actual separation of the surface A and B remained constant. This may seem small, but the volume is huge. Giraffes and dinosaurs, if Earth were the size of Model Carey, 250 million years ago, probably it would have had only 50% of your current weight. As was growing, severity increased. Proponents of the theory of Earth expansion are quick to point out that this explains some mysteries that have puzzled archaeologists and biologists. It seems that they are confused to explain how animals and dinosaurs may have evolved into so great. Giraffes have a maximum that can grow their neck's height. This is determined by the force of gravity on the blood in the arteries that travel to their brains. A height of more than 5 meters apparently reaches the limits of the heart muscles. But dinosaurs were much larger. How they succeeded adequate blood perfusion in the brain? According to researcher and author Stephen Horrell, to understand why the dinosaurs were so large we need to return to the issue of the large size of its head, and ask why animals today do not grow as big as dinosaurs. As any animal gets bigger, its mass, and therefore its weight, varies in relation to the unit length cubed, while the area and therefore strength of the legs varies in relation to the unit length squared. This mathematical relationship governs the size of life. Therefore, while the animals increase in size, strength-to-weight ratio is reduced to reach an upper size limit. This upper limit is the reason why it is so surprising that the dinosaurs were so huge. Life today seems to have reached the maximum size achievable, although life during the time of dinosaurs was much wider. This could be explained if large dinosaurs weighed less, since gravity was less at the time. Life-size reconstruction of a dragonfly 280 million years ago. Prehistoric giant flying insects also suggest much less areas in the past. There are other bodies in the universe expanding like Mars and Jupiter's moons, such as Ganymede. Even more surprising is Jupiter's moon Europa. NASA admits that is in the process of expansion,